Have you ever had a really, really bad manager? And more importantly, how did that manager impact your motivation, your engagement, your performance? My name's Simon Tyson. I'm the CEO of The Real Learning Experience. Today I plan to share with you the story of the worst manager I've ever had and the impact they had on the results I achieved for that organisation. Let me give you a little bit of background. The last job I had before I started this company was working for a radio station. Now obviously when I left there I started a business. I'm a person with a bit of drive, a bit of get up and go. I've got a fair bit of motivation. However, the job I was doing before I started this company sucked every bit of drive, every bit of motivation, every bit of passion out of me, and it was reflected in my performance. The most senior manager at that organisation had a really old school controlling style. When people did things in the workplace, it was because he told them to, not because they were motivated to do them. When he wanted to communicate with an employee, it was to give them instructions. When he talked about why you should do it, it was the consequences of not doing it, the negative consequences of not doing it, rather than the positive consequences of being engaged and performing at a high level. Now, needless to say, the staff didn't particularly like this manager. They worked for him because he gave them a job. They didn't work for him because they loved being there, because they respected him, or because they were particularly driven to perform at a high level. This whole dynamic was encapsulated in one incident that will always be a guiding principle for me, or more perhaps a warning principle for me, for as long as I work to develop leaders' capabilities. As I mentioned, this organisation was a radio station, and radio stations are highly driven by audience numbers. If you have high audience numbers, you have a strong proposition to put in front of potential advertisers. About 2 years after I started with this organisation, we received a really poor performance in the annual audience ratings. In our target demographic, which was listeners between 25 and 54, we performed particularly poorly. Yet those were the same people that many of our most loyal advertisers were targeting. This was obviously a fairly critical point in the performance of that radio station. A group of employees got together voluntarily, discretionary effort. We didn't need to do this. We did it in our lunch breaks. We did it after work. We got together because we were actually in that target market. We were in that category 25 to 54. And most particularly, we were in the lower end of that demographic. This was a group of about 15 employees voluntarily spending their time. And what we were aiming to achieve is to give feedback to the station as people in that demographic about why we might not be performing so well in the demographic. After 3 or 4 meetings, we put all of our thoughts, our suggestions, our propositions together into a presentation. And we asked our manager and a couple of other senior people at the station to give us some time to present our thoughts. They joined us in the boardroom one afternoon. What we believed was going to be a positive presentation of ideas became a really unpleasant, really uncomfortable situation in which the most senior manager, the worst manager I've ever had, essentially grilled us about our lack of commitment in finding fault with his strategies. This small-minded reaction to the commitment we'd shown undermined our motivation, our engagement, and many of those people left the employment of that radio station shortly afterwards, myself included. Instead of recognising that the ideas and suggestions, the feedback that we'd come up with was an indication of high commitment and was actually an example of a lot of discretionary effort, that manager saw them as an attack. Now, I believe The reason he saw that as an attack was the fact that he was insecure in his own performance. That insecurity played out in a leadership style that expected people to fall in line and do what they were told. When we made this extra effort, it was seen as falling out of line rather than as employees giving over and above. After that meeting in which we presented the ideas we'd worked so hard to come up with, instead of feeling motivated, instead of feeling a satisfaction with what we'd achieved or that we'd contributed in some meaningful way, we actually had a number of people in tears. We had people who feared that their job was in danger. We had people who were angry. We had people who were resentful. All of that was related to this manager's leadership style. All of it was related to their reaction to the discretionary effort that so many committed people had made. That incident was on a fairly large scale. It involved a lot of employees who'd spent a lot of time. But I wonder how often we as managers make that same mistake on a small but perhaps daily basis. When people in our team make some small effort, they come up with a new idea, they make a suggestion, they think about things beyond the point at which they have to. They make that discretionary effort. Sometimes there's a danger that because we're busy, because we're defensive, because we're under pressure, potentially we may throw that discretionary effort back in their face. I know that many people watching this wouldn't do that deliberately. However, deliberate's not the point. If that's the sense that people have when they make a discretionary effort, that they were not appreciated for it, then we can't expect them to continue making discretionary effort in the future. I certainly know that at that radio station, I started to do what had to be done rather than what could possibly be achieved. I started to cruise. I started to fly under the radar and go home and spend my energy on things I was truly committed to. I'm fully aware that in doing so, I let myself down as a person and I let my organisation down as an employee. But that's the impact that the manager's reaction to that discretionary effort had. Finding good people in a competitive employment market is difficult, which makes keeping them even more important. When your people make discretionary effort, make sure they don't regret it and decide to take that discretionary effort somewhere else. As always, I hope you enjoy watching these videos. Please subscribe to receive blog alerts to make sure you never miss a new article, a new video, or a new free resource.